I'll be sharing my screen. When you're working on the Pathways Education Program, of course, you have to start off by going here to Toastmasters.org and logging in. Your login is from the email that you originally supplied to Toastmasters when you enrolled as a member. Once you're in here, I recommend that you use the Pathways tab right here that I'm pointing at. And within that, I suggest that you use Go to Basecamp as the most efficient way to access the education program in Pathways. When it comes up, you'll have these 3 blue tiles. Mine in the center tile has an option for logging in as Basecamp Manager, which most of you will not have, although there are 2 other people besides the Vice President Education who does have that. Do you know what they are? Somebody tell me. Tracy knows. President.
And the secretary.
And secretary, yes, very good. Thank you, Roxanne. So right now, this says go to Basecamp, and most of you will only have that choice, going to Basecamp as your option. When you go to Basecamp, you now get a group of 5 tiles to look at, and there are 2 ways to access your education materials for Pathways. One is the second blue tile, Education Transcript, gets you the exact same place as if you go down here to this red banner that says My Education Transcript. I choose to go that way. And of course, you'll notice that I have quite a few things in my listing, but you might only have a couple things. You might have this navigator, and you might have whatever path you've chosen. In this case, I'm showing you something from the curriculum Effective Coaching. Now, this shows what I've done so far in Effective Coaching, and you'll notice that the things I have not done say activate. That's the very first step. The things that I have done have launch, and if I just recently completed it within the first 10 days after completion, it will have this option to evaluate it. I wish they'd use a different term, but evaluate here means for me to give feedback to Toastmasters International about this particular program. If you have happened to click through and completed, or made it look like you completed your materials, but you want to go back, right here, this little down arrow in the red button will allow you there. And in this case, I'm going to go back and launch because we want to look at the material that's in that evaluation and feedback. I think this is one of the most confusing of the PATH projects when you're first getting started. I use those buttons on the side, not the title of the project itself, because the title of the project itself will actually just get you your training details. Says when you've opened it, how long you've spent, where you've been, what you've done so far. And because I've been in this material and have looked through it all the way to the end, when it comes up, it will be at the end of the pathway project, and I'm going to go back using this little down arrow at the bottom as an access to my table of contents. So no matter where you are in a particular project, you can use this to pop up the table of contents and go to any place you want. Of course, normally when you're first beginning, it will start you here at the beginning with this navigation slide. We'll spend a little bit of time looking at the details of all of these things. It tells you on this screenshot that the gray arrow out here is how you advance between one slide to the other. It reminds you that when there is a red button saying next or more, that there's additional information. And of course, the number of dots here tells you how many different pieces of information there are. And then at the bottom, you have the directions, which gives you some hints as to how to maneuver through particular things. Then it begins with introductory information. Read the slides, keep moving, read the slides, keep moving. It popped up directions here. It says, if you want to print your project, if you like to have that written material where you can put your hands on it and scribble in the margins while you're working on it, this will tell you how. It pops up this little tutorial reference guide, and it will walk you through the steps of how to print a project in its entirety. When you're done looking at that reference guide, this little X in the corner brings you back where you were, and the down arrow gets rid of the directions so you're back into the material of the content. This particular page of the content tells you about your assignment and a project checklist. Anything that's in red is worth looking at. A 5 to 7 minute speech, and then you incorporate the feedback from the first speech to have a second speech of 5 to 7 minutes. You can request longer if you need it. And then, of course, the third piece of this project for evaluation and feedback is for when you as the member are a speech evaluator for someone else who's speaking. Those three things, a speech that you either repeat or do something similar, and then you serving as an evaluator. When you're done looking at that, you go back up to the top bar and get rid of it, and you're back to the slides where you were, continuing to move through. Every single project begins with this little section called Before. Assess your skills before. It asks you to identify, how good do I feel about this skill? Now, sometimes you think you're wonderful, and by the time you get through the material, you go, oh, I wasn't so wonderful after all. But what they ask you to do is to answer these 7 questions, 7 dots, 7 questions, by selecting a number and moving to next, and selecting a number and moving to next until you have answered all 7 of the questions. When you get all the way done, selecting your number all the way through, it will then say a next in the gray, and that is your target to remind you that you can now move forward using the gray arrow. So the gray box says go to the gray arrow. Then it tells you about what kinds of things you'll learn and gives you all sorts of interesting content. Here's an example of where the word more means there's additional information that you can click through all the various pieces of that slide. And this is another version where on the bottom you see the 5 dots and the next to tell you there's additional material there. Click through each of them to see what there is before you move on to the next slide. Then as you go through the material, you'll see this one is a little bit different. So again, it gives you some directions, and it says we're going to ask you to look at advice versus feedback. So now, getting rid of the directions, the difference in being an effective evaluator between advising someone with something like don't be so scared and feedback is something that they can actually use a little bit more. I noticed you were shaking. Anybody have an idea what feedback would be in exchange for you need to stand up straight?
I noticed you were slouching.
Okay. Something that you observed. Beautiful. So each of these have little things. I had trouble hearing you. You notice these are I statements and observations. When we do the best job of giving people evaluation feedback, it's with I statements and stating an observation. What did you notice? As you go through the rest of this material, it's not just how to receive feedback, but also then how to give feedback. And of course, as you go along, it has this little video clip. This is a 6-minute and 47-second video. And of course, these controls on the bottom allow you to control how the video is progressing. You can have closed captions if you want. I recommend that if you have not gone and watched this 6:47 video, that you do it at least once, if not a couple times. And particularly as an experienced evaluator, I found I learned some things. There's a whole 20-minute plus tutorial out there, but this little 6.5-minute video is a very nice summary. Again, you'll see there's more information beneath there. And here it says, again, next, 4 little dots, more information within that slide. And then periodically you'll see this. They'll ask you to give some answers to questions that says, well, did you get what they were trying to get the point across? It says begin private evaluations by asking the speaker how he. Well, what if I said, oh, wrong answer? It says, not quite. But it'll go on to question number 2. And maybe I say, okay, I'm giving you, I statements. We said I statements. Oh, good. It said I was correct. Answer question number 3. Maybe it's going to be the observation. And then you'll notice it comes back to the one I got wrong. And it will ask me again until I get the correct answer. A review, and then here is where completing your assignment goes back to your checklist, gives you some more information there. And the last part of the content for every project is going to be here where it talks about your evaluation. 5, we can't offer you anything to do better in this particular area. Of course, there are different areas. You might be exemplary in vocal variety and need some work in gestures. Excels, well, you're pretty darn good. 3, accomplished means you met the objective. 3 is the target. 3 is what's expected. So if you all have gotten feedback from me, you've probably seen a lot of 3s and a few 4s if you're pretty new at this still. And this is also where you're going to meet, where you can print just the evaluation resources, the evaluation forms for each piece. And of course, you can print the whole project. Every project will end after you've given your speech with this, assessing your skills after. It's the same 7 questions you heard at the very beginning. And after you've clicked through, assigned each a number, and next, all the way through, it will submit and then show you this comparison slide. If you have not hit submit, it won't show you this comparison slide, and it won't think you're done with this material. We'll look for submit, look for the comparison slide. And from that point, it says, wow, you finished this project. And the next thing we'll have to figure out is how to do a level completion request, but that's a topic for another day. Madam Toastmaster.